What happens when a man who publicly imploded in the most spectacular fashion in television history, who became a punchline, a cautionary tale, and a cultural phenomenon all at once, sits down for what should be a redemption interview only to have every demon from his past dragged back into the spotlight? What you're about to witness is one of the most raw and explosive confrontations ever captured on daytime television. The moment when Charlie Sheen, a man who thought he had seen and survived everything, discovered that some people aren't interested in redemption stories, and what happened next would remind the world that the man they had written off still had plenty of fight left in him. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments because, trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. The morning had a strange energy to it from the start. Charlie Sheen arrived at the View Studios in Manhattan, looking nothing like the wild-eyed, erratic figure that had dominated tabloids over a decade ago. At 59 years old, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that surprised the production staff who remembered his more chaotic days. His hair was neatly trimmed, his suit was understated, and his handshake was steady. This was a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side, scarred but standing. He was there to promote a new independent film, a small project that had given him a chance to act again after years in the wilderness. More importantly, he was there to show the world that the man who had once declared himself to be winning while his life crumbled around him had finally found something that actually looked like victory. Sobriety, stability, a second chance that he knew he didn't entirely deserve but was determined to honor. The studio lights were bright as Charlie took his seat at the famous table. He squinted slightly against the glare, a reminder of how long it had been since he had done the talk show circuit. The audience gave him a warm welcome, warmer than he had expected. These were people who remembered him from 2.5 Men, from Platoon, from Major League, from Wall Street. They remembered the talent before they remembered the tabloids, and there was something in their applause that suggested they wanted to believe in his comeback. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with measured warmth. Our next guest has had quite a journey, from being one of the highest-paid actors in television history to facing some very public personal struggles. He's now back with a new film and what he calls a new perspective on life. Please welcome Charlie Sheen. The applause was genuine, if cautious. Charlie waved to the audience with a smile that carried more gratitude than showmanship. Thank you, really. Thank you for having me. It's good to be anywhere these days. The self-deprecating humor landed well, drawing a few laughs from the audience. Sarah Haynes asked about the new film, and Charlie spoke with obvious passion about the project, about the director who had taken a chance on him when no one else would, about the joy of being on a set again after so many years in exile from the industry he loved. You know, when you've been where I've been, you don't take anything for granted, Charlie said, his voice carrying a weight that came from hard-earned wisdom. Every day I get to do this work, I'm grateful. Every day I wake up clear-headed and present, I'm grateful. That might sound like a cliche, but when you've almost lost everything, cliches become truths you hold on to for survival. The audience was with him. You could feel the goodwill in the room, the collective desire to believe in his redemption. For a few minutes, everything felt exactly as his publicist had hoped it would. Then Joy Behar leaned forward with that familiar glint in her eyes, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. So Charlie, Joy began, her voice carrying an edge that made the other hosts shift uncomfortably in their seats. You talk about being grateful and not taking things for granted, but let's be honest here. You had more chances than most people get in a lifetime. You made millions of dollars, had every opportunity in the world, and you threw it all away. Multiple times. Why should anyone believe that this time is different? The question landed like a punch to the gut. The audience went quiet. Charlie's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed what had just been thrown at him on live television. "That's a fair question, Joy," he replied, his voice still controlled, but now carrying a cautious undertone. "And the honest answer is that I can't make anyone believe anything. All I can do is show up every day and try to be better than I was the day before. My track record isn't great, I know that. But I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to do the work." Joy wasn't satisfied. She leaned back with a smirk that suggested she was just getting started. "Do the work. That's very 12-step of you. But let's talk about what that work actually involves. You put a lot of people through hell, Charlie. Your ex-wives, your children, the people who worked with you on set every day. You cost the network hundreds of millions of dollars with your behavior. You said things publicly that were offensive and erratic. And now, we're supposed to just welcome you back because you've learned some recovery slogans? Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sunny Hostin looked like she wanted to redirect the conversation immediately. Even Whoopi's expression had tightened slightly. This wasn't the tone anyone had expected for what was supposed to be a promotional interview. Charlie took a breath, visibly centering himself before responding. I'm not asking anyone to forget what happened. I'm not asking for a pass. What I did, the way I behaved, the people I hurt, I have to live with that every single day. And I should live with it. Actions have consequences, and I've faced more consequences than most people will ever know. Have you, though? Joy pressed, her voice rising slightly. Because from where I sit, you still live in a nice house. You still have money in the bank. You still get invited on talk shows to promote your projects. The consequences for people like you aren't the same as they are for regular people. Regular people lose everything and never get it back. You lose everything and get a redemption tour. The accusation was pointed and deliberate, designed to undermine any sympathy the audience might have been feeling. Charlie's jaw tightened, and for a moment, those who remembered his more volatile days might have braced for an explosion. But the explosion didn't come. Instead, something colder and more controlled took its place. You want to talk about consequences, Joy? Charlie's voice was quiet, but carried a weight that filled the studio. Let me tell you about consequences. I lost my career. Not took a break. Lost it completely. I went from being the highest paid actor on television to being unhireable. I lost relationships with people I loved more than anything. I lost years of my life to addiction and chaos. I lost my reputation, my dignity, and very nearly my life on multiple occasions. He paused, his eyes locked on Joy's face with an intensity that made several people in the front row lean back slightly. And you know what? I deserve to lose those things. I'm not sitting here asking for pity. But don't you dare sit there and tell me I haven't faced consequences when you have no idea what it's like to watch your entire life burn down around you while the whole world laughs and makes memes about your destruction. The response was powerful, delivered with the kind of raw honesty that silenced the studio completely. But Joy inexplicably pressed forward. Oh, please. You brought all of that on yourself with your tiger blood and Adonis DNA nonsense. You turned your breakdown into a media circus. You profited from it. You went on tour selling tickets to watch you ramble incoherently. You sold merchandise with your catchphrases. So, spare me the sob story about watching your life burn down. You were the one holding the match and selling tickets to the fire. The words hit the studio like a slap across the face. Several audience members gasped audibly. Alyssa Farrah Griffin's eyes went wide with shock. Sarah Haynes was staring at her notes, clearly wishing she could disappear into the floor. Charlie sat very still for a moment, processing what had just been said to him on national television. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to a register that those who knew him would recognize as dangerous territory. You want to talk about that period, Joy? Fine. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what a mental health crisis looks like when it happens in public. Let's talk about what happens when someone is clearly unwell and instead of getting help, they get cameras shoved in their face. Let's talk about how the media, how shows exactly like this one, turned a man having a breakdown into entertainment content. He leaned forward, his intensity filling the space between them. I'm not proud of that time. I was sick. I was out of my mind. And yes, I made choices that made everything worse. But you know what I didn't see during that period? Compassion. Understanding. Anyone saying, maybe this guy needs help instead of a headline. All I saw was people like you, waiting to see how far I would fall so you could talk about it on television. Joy's smirk faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly with practiced defensive instincts. You're a grown man, Charlie. You can't blame the media for your choices. You went on every show that would have you. You said the things you said. Nobody made you do that. You're right, Charlie agreed, surprising her. Nobody made me do it. I was responsible for my actions, even when I wasn't in my right mind. I've spent years in therapy understanding that, accepting that, working through that. I've spent years making amends where I can and accepting that some damage can't be undone. He paused, his voice gaining strength. But here's what I've also learned, Joy. There's a difference between holding someone accountable and taking pleasure in their destruction. And you seem to be enjoying this a little too much for someone who claims to care about accountability. The observation was devastating in its accuracy. Joy's face flushed red, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely caught off guard by the counterattack. "I'm doing my job," she said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Someone has to ask the hard questions instead of just letting celebrities coast on their redemption narratives. Hard questions? Charlie laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. A hard question would be asking me about the work I've done in recovery. A hard question would be asking how I've tried to repair relationships with my children. A hard question would be asking what I've learned about mental health and addiction that might help someone else who's struggling. Those are hard questions that might actually produce meaningful answers. What you're doing is just pouring salt in wounds for entertainment value. Whoopi attempted to intervene, sensing the interview spiraling out of control. "Maybe we should talk about the film and what drew you to this particular project." But Charlie wasn't finished. Something had broken open, and years of staying quiet, of taking his lumps, of accepting every piece of criticism thrown his way without response were finally demanding to be heard. "No, Whoopi, with all respect, I think this needs to be addressed." He turned back to Joy. "You asked why anyone should believe I've changed. Let me tell you why. Because I'm sitting here right now having this conversation instead of storming off. Because I'm acknowledging my mistakes instead of making excuses. Because I've spent the last several years out of the spotlight, doing the actual work of getting better instead of performing recovery for cameras." His voice was gaining strength, fueled by something that looked like years of stored emotion finally finding release. "Do you know what it's like to be a cautionary tale? To have your worst moments become punchlines that people repeat at parties? To watch your name become shorthand for self-destruction? I've lived with that for over a decade, and I've never once complained about it publicly because I knew I earned it. But I didn't come here today to be put on trial by someone who seems more interested in entertainment than truth." Joy crossed her arms defensively. "I'm asking the questions that viewers want answered. You can't expect to come back into public life without facing scrutiny." "Scrutiny I can handle," Charlie shot back. "I've been scrutinized more than almost anyone in this industry. What I won't handle is cruelty disguised as journalism." "You're not trying to understand anything, Joy. You're not trying to have a real conversation about addiction, about mental health, about what it takes to rebuild a life after you've destroyed it completely. You're just trying to get a reaction, to create a moment, to have something that will trend on social media after this segment is over." He stood up from his chair, his full presence now commanding the studio in a way that reminded everyone of the screen presence that had made him a star. "Well, congratulations. You got your moment. But let me tell you what that moment cost you. You had a chance today to have a real conversation with someone who has been to rock bottom and climbed back out. You could have asked questions that might actually help someone watching who's struggling with addiction or mental health issues. Instead, you chose to be cruel, and that says a lot more about you than it does about me." Joy's face had gone red with anger, or embarrassment, or some combination of both. "How dare you lecture me about cruelty? After everything you've done, after everyone you've hurt, you think you get to take the moral high ground?" "I'm not taking any high ground," Charlie replied, his voice dropping to something quieter, but somehow more powerful. "I know exactly where I stand. I'm a man who made terrible choices and hurt people I loved. I'm a man who had everything and threw it away because I was sick and refused to get help. I'm a man who has spent years trying to earn back even a fraction of what I lost. I'm not claiming to be a saint. I'm claiming to be a work in progress." He paused, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. "But you know what I'm not? I'm not someone who uses other people's pain for entertainment. I'm not someone who kicks people when they're trying to get back up. And I'm not someone who pretends that cruelty is the same thing as accountability." The silence that followed was absolute. The other hosts sat frozen in their chairs, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let this moment play out to its conclusion. The audience seemed to be holding their collective breath. Joy made one more attempt to regain control of the narrative. "I think you're being oversensitive. These are legitimate questions about your past and your present. If you can't handle them, maybe you're not as recovered as you claim to be." Charlie's laugh was short and sharp. "Oversensitive. That's what people always say when they've been called out for being cruel. They blame the person they've hurt for having feelings about it. But let me tell you something, Joy. I've been clean for years. I've been in therapy for years. I've done more work on myself than you can possibly imagine. And part of that work is learning to recognize when someone is engaging in good faith and when they're just trying to draw blood for sport. He straightened his jacket with deliberate calm. You weren't engaging in good faith today. You came into this interview with an agenda, and that agenda wasn't to understand or to inform. It was to tear down. And I'm not going to stand here and participate in my own destruction. Not anymore. I did enough of that on my own for far too many years. He turned to address the camera directly, speaking to the millions of viewers watching at home. To anyone watching who's struggling with addiction, with mental health issues, with the consequences of choices you wish you could take back, I want you to know something important. Recovery is possible. Redemption is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, and not everyone is going to believe in you. Some people, like Joy here, are going to actively root for you to fail because your failure makes better content than your success ever will. His voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Don't let them stop you. Don't let the people who profit from your pain convince you that you don't deserve to get better. The only person who gets to decide whether you're worth saving is you. And I'm here to tell you, from the bottom of the pit and back again, that you are worth it, even when the whole world tells you otherwise. The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then building to something significant and sustained. Charlie acknowledged them with a small nod before turning back to Joy, one final time. I hope you never have to experience what I've experienced. I hope you never have to watch everything you've built crumble because of your own choices. I hope you never have to claw your way back from rock bottom while the world cheers for you to fail. But if you ever do find yourself in that position, I hope you meet more compassion than you've shown me today. Because everyone deserves at least that much. Even people who've made terrible mistakes. Even me. With that, Charlie Sheen walked off the stage with a dignity that seemed to surprise everyone in the studio, perhaps even himself. The audience sat in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Joy Behar sitting at the table with an expression that was difficult to read, somewhere between defiance and the dawning recognition that she had perhaps gone too far. What had started as a promotional interview for a small independent film had become something far more significant. A man who had been written off as a joke, a cautionary tale, a symbol of self-destruction, had stood up and demanded to be seen as something more. Not a saint, not a victim. Just a human being trying to be better than he was. And as the studio fell into uncomfortable silence, one thing was absolutely clear. The man who had once declared himself to be winning had finally learned what winning actually looked like. And it had nothing to do with tiger blood or Adonis DNA. It was simply the quiet courage to keep getting up, no matter how many times the world tried to knock him down. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.